At 9:17 p.m., every screen in my house turned red. Not a storm warning, not an Amber Alert, just two words, block letters, white on blood, crawled across my phone, my TV, even the unused kitchen radio that hadn't hissed in years. We are sorry. No county name, no tone sequence, no instructions. The message hung there like a confession that had slipped out by accident. I stared at it, waiting for the rest. Seek shelter, boil water, evacuate. But nothing followed. Outside, our quiet street in a small town looked the same as any weeknight. Yellow sodium lamps hummed. A late sedan rolled through the four-way, tires whispering. Somewhere far off, a dog barked twice and stopped, like it remembered something. My friend Ryan texted me before I could text him. "You get that too?" "Yeah, what does it even mean?" "Probably a test," he wrote. Then, after a beat, "Right?" Before I could answer, the air changed. A low mechanical hum drifted in, a sound that wasn't part of the town's vocabulary. I muted the TV, turned the radio dial out of habit, and realized the hum wasn't in the speaker. It was in the sky. Helicopters. Two at first, then more. Black, unmarked, slipping low over rooftops with their searchlights off. They passed so close the walls breathed. A second later, something heavier rumbled the road. Vehicles I'd never seen outside a movie, moving like a slow parade with rifles walking beside them. My lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the whole block went dark. The message didn't. "We are sorry" stayed, bright as an apology you couldn't refuse. I live alone. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, small town boredom baked into the drywall. You learn the rhythms here. The quiet grocery lines, the church bells that argue with crows every Sunday, the way the air smells like pennies before rain. That night had started the same. Half watching a reality show I didn't care about, eating dry cereal from a mug, scrolling until my thumb went numb. Nothing special. Nothing to deserve a broadcast confession. We don't get much of anything in Rookfield. 1 high school, 1 faded bowling alley that insists on a Tuesday league like it's holy writ, a gas station at the edge of town where everyone pays in cash because the card reader died in 2012 and never came back. If something big happens, you hear it 3 ways. From the barber, from the clerk at the hardware store, and from Miss Keever, who runs the library like it's a fort, and gossip like it's intelligence. No one ever said we sat on a fault line. The power dying wasn't natural. It felt chosen. Street by street, like a hand covering mouths. 1 second, my living room was a dull aquarium. The next, it was a black box where the red of the alert cast long, wrong shadows. Outside, the world lost its soft edges. The helicopters came back with lights this time, white cones that peeled paint from clapboard and wrote secrets on lawns. Trucks followed, matte and too broad for our roads, with men in black gear stepping down in pairs. They didn't break doors. They knocked. Polite. Practiced. Like they'd practiced here. I watched them approach Mr. Dawson's house 2 down, an old man with a lawn he measured with a ruler, and a dog that hated my mail carrier. I expected shouting, hands, maybe a push-in. Instead, I saw one gloved palm lift in a careful hello, and the old man's outline shake his head and shake again until one of the men put a steady hand on his shoulder. Mr. Dawson stopped shaking. He nodded. He stepped aside. Ryan's next text buzzed my palm like a wasp. Soldiers, or something. Masks. You seeing this? Yeah. Another. Power just died here too. I typed, "They're knocking doors," then deleted that, because it sounded like a panic headline. I typed, "Nothing yet," and sent that lie. The trucks rolled on. One stopped outside the house across from mine. My neighbor Laura answered, arms folded in a robe, her hair tied high like she'd been in the middle of something ordinary. One of the men spoke. Even through glass, I could see her mouth shape the word "why" twice. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. He set a heavy case in her entryway and pointed at the floor. She blinked, stepped back, and the door closed.
If this were a storm, they'd tell us to shelter. If this were a chemical spill, we'd hear sirens and smell bleach. If this were an attack, the phones would scream in chorus. But all we had was a sentence that didn't belong to the living. We are sorry. I told myself it was an error, some intern somewhere hitting the wrong key. I told myself a lot of things while my breath snuck shallow and the house became all corners. Then I felt it, a quiver in the floorboards that floated up through my shoes and set a tiny tuning fork behind my teeth. Not a truck, not a helicopter, something heavier than the town. The alert buzzed again, not with new words but with the same two, brightening, as if the apology was learning to speak louder. At 9:45 p.m., it stopped learning and started eating. The first roar was not a sound, but a shape. It shoved the air forward in a wave that slapped my windows and staggered me back from the glass. Somewhere on the next block, a woman screamed, the kind of scream you don't produce for drama or attention, the kind you scrape up when your body recognizes a predator your mind can't name. The helicopter stopped orbiting and started hunting. Flares cracked open overhead, spilling red daylight down the spine of Main Street. Shadows got thicker, not thinner. The black trucks unfolded men like knives. Gunfire began like a bad rhythm. Single pops, a volley, a lull. Then it became a sheet, a hard rain tearing shingles and branches. I watched the tree line behind the Dawson place convulse, as if something big shouldered every trunk at once. Muffled commands bled through radios into the night. One of the armored vehicles coughed a smoke that smelled like burned rubber and old coins. My phone vibrated so hard it nearly leapt from my palm. "Gas station," Ryan wrote. "Hurry, before the roads close." I grabbed my backpack, stupidly heavy for a life that weighs nothing. Flashlight, multi-tool, a knife I'd used twice on cardboard and once on an apple. I hesitated on the front door's knob, then a second roar made the decision. It came from the left. I went right. The street was red and wrong, flares making familiar houses look like crime scenes. People ran in bursts, barefoot, pajama-shorted, clutching keys as if you could unlock what was happening. A boy I recognized from the high school sprinted past with his eyes fixed on a horizon that wasn't there. The old welcome sign that said, "Rookfield, friendly faces," lay on its back in the gutter like something that had been told to lie down. The further I got from my block, the stranger the damage became, not broken, erased. A car was folded in half at the hood, its engine block rucked up like a fist had closed around it. A row of mailboxes had been bent into a single smile. The pavement itself bulged in a place, asphalt puckered like something heavy had pressed a footprint from below. I texted, "2 blocks out, you okay?" No answer. Then, "Here, behind counter. Roof is bad." The gas station roof had always been bad. I ran harder. When I rounded the final corner, I saw it in pieces. Canopy slouched, window shattered into glinting gravel, the snack aisle exposed to the night like a rib cage. I shouted his name. No answer. Then faint, like a voice from a crowded room. "Over here." I slid through broken glass and the heavy, sweet stink of fuel and found Ryan crouched behind the counter. His face looked like someone had erased it and drawn fear in its place. "Don't move," he whispered, and the floor vibrated. It came into view in slices, first a shadow blotting out the red, then the edges of it catching flare light like wet teeth. For something that big, it should have been clumsy. It wasn't. It threaded between buildings as if it had practiced the route in a model town. Every footfall was a suggestion more than a choice, and yet when it landed, the earth learned new verbs. People talk about monsters like they are animals with extra limbs. This wasn't that. This was what happens when someone tries to build a rule and fails. It looked borrowed from different departments: fur, scale, tendon gliding over bone that didn't agree with itself. A torso that wasn't sure where to stop. The head, if you could call it a head, split along old seams to reveal a second mouth nested crooked inside, like a wound that teaches itself to eat. Eyes, yes and no. There were lights where eyes might volunteer to be, some lit, some empty. Some drifted off in their own directions as if they'd lost the plot. It breathed through slits that hid, then opened in slow, obscene pulses. And beneath the flesh, in the places the flare showed too much, something darker than muscle writhed, as if the body were a glove that didn't quite fit the hand inside. "Do they see it?" I whispered. "They're shooting at it," Ryan said, which is not the same thing. He wasn't wrong. A squad in the street below welded the night together with muzzle flashes. The sound was nothing like cinema. It was a whip-crack chorus that shuddered the belly. One of the armored trucks coughed a missile into the creature's ribs, and the explosion shook the gas station's teeth. For a second, for a stupid, hopeful second, the shape staggered. Then the smoke cleared, and the staggering was ours. The thing turned on the men like they'd spoken out of turn. It moved fast without seeming to. A limb with too many joints rode a line through 3 bodies at once. A hand that wasn't a hand closed on a man's torso, and the sound of him ending was like a satchel dropped in mud. Another soldier tried to run and was gathered up mid-scream, his voice cutting off, not because he had no air, but because the part of him that made voice had changed jobs. The creature did not roar now. It worked. Something in it broke. Not flesh, pattern. A webbing under the skin cracked like old lacquer, and a blacker black seeped through the lines and writhed. The eyes that had been sleeping woke and forgot to agree. They swiveled on their own axes, scanning in different centuries. That's when it looked at us. I don't know if it truly saw us. The counter, the angle, the ragged lip of the collapsed roof. We were a pocket of night inside a pocket of red. But the feeling was immediate and total, a spotlight without light, a page pinned by a thumb. The creature's head cocked like a question. Then something snagged its attention to the south, and the decision that would have ended us wandered away with it. The guns went on until they didn't. The monster left a silence that made my teeth ache. "We move now," I said, voice a stranger's. "To where?" Ryan swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing like it was attached to a string. "There's nowhere." "Checkpoints," I said. "They'll be pulling people out, or pushing them away. Either way, it's away." Outside, the street looked like a myth had eaten it. I climbed the counter and slid down into the glass, boots grinding sugar and chips into a paste that smelled like a birthday party at a crash site. The bodies of the men in black lay in the road like punctuation, commas, a semicolon where 2 had fallen together. I crouched beside one, and my hands found gear before my head did. Gas mask, plate carrier. The rifle was too heavy and smelled like hot metal. I took the pistol instead and hated the way my hand knew how to hold it. "Ryan," I said, and he didn't move. "Ryan!" He stared at a dead man's face as if it was about to say his name. His breath hitched, and his hands refused orders from his brain.
It was like watching a computer freeze, cursor blinking, nothing responding. I wanted to put my palms on his cheeks and tell him to come back. I wanted to drag him by the shoulders to the truck and make his body remember. Gunfire erupted again, closer. A scream tore itself in two. The creature was looping back. You could feel it, like pressure building in pipes before a burst. Ryan flinched. Something in him snapped not to life, but to flight. He dropped the vest, turned, and ran. "Wait," I said. He didn't. "Ryan!" I had 2 seconds to decide whether to chase him into the creature's returning orbit or become a person who survives. I became the worst thing. I tucked my head, sprinted the other way, and hated myself with an intimacy that felt like prayer. I ducked behind an overturned armored vehicle and breathed fuel. The gear I'd stolen made my skin feel like it belonged to someone else. The pistol thumped against my thigh in a rhythm that insisted on itself. Across the street, a woman crawled under a car that had no under left. The air tasted old and mean. Somewhere a transformer popped blue. I moved when the shooting shifted. I moved when the screaming Dopplered passed. I folded my body into alleys, slid along fences that remembered children's hands, slipped through a backyard where a tricycle lay on its side like a crown. Every few houses, I saw the black-suited soldiers in 2s and 3s, guiding families with their heads lowered, like ushers in a church after something went wrong. No one looked up. No one asked why. The apology glowed on phone screens, lighting faces like ghosts. By the time I reached the edge of town, my legs had opinions I didn't share. The checkpoint rose from the dark like a theater, floodlights painting the road in hard white, sandbags smartly nested, barbed wire singing to itself in a mild wind. Soldiers, some black-suited, some in more familiar greens and browns, moved with the coiled stutter of people who'd slept last week. A sergeant whose sleeve was darker on one side with blood that might have been his or someone else's barked from the passenger seat of a transport truck. I slowed down, pulled my shoulders into the shape of someone expected, and walked toward them. "Stop," a young soldier commanded, raising his rifle to the exact height of my sternum. "ID." "I'm with the ground unit off Lincoln. We got separated." I made my voice bored. "Men at check face you believe because you have to." "Code sign," he said, quiet. I didn't know if he was checking my answer or my pulse. A tremor ran under our boots like a dog scratching in the basement of the world. The floodlights flickered and stayed. The young soldier's radio gargled words. "Moving. On the checkpoint, all units." "Prepare to." The older one didn't wait to finish the sentence. He jerked a thumb at the nearest transport. "In." I climbed into the back of the truck and found a row of faces looking like they were trying to remember the last joke they'd heard. Not kids, not veterans, just people caught between doing a job and surviving it. Opposite me, a man's helmet sat askew and revealed a line of dried blood that had braided itself into his hair. He stared past me like I was a window. The truck lurched forward. The convoy turned its face away from town. As we cleared the last row of trees, I looked back and watched my whole life catch fire. Helicopters strafed the main drag, long tongues of ordnance peeling roofs off houses like scalps. A steeple tipped, considered, then knelt. The creature blasted through smoke at a speed that disrespected its size, limbs finding purchase on everything like it was built of footholds. Turrets on the convoy's flank spat light, and the light looked small. The monster ate the distance like hunger had discovered a shape. The transport radio coughed the same voice from our screens, rephrased for professionals. "We regret to inform you containment has failed. If you are still in the zone..." The voice didn't finish. It didn't have to. Everyone inside the truck knew the syllabus after that sentence. You close a door you don't want anyone to open again. Code black, someone whispered, and the word nuking arrived without anyone daring to say it. It didn't land as a threat. It landed as a decision already signed. We crossed the last intersection out of Rookfield, and the night became a light that swallowed light.
I have seen videos. I have seen tests on desert flats where the camera shakes and a tower becomes a fountain and a cloud grows a stalk. I have seen history class, safety films, clips scored to music by people who thought they understood metaphor. None of it teaches you what it feels like when the sky reaches into your lungs and pinches them shut. The flash hit first, so bright it had texture, like someone had emptied a bag of sand made of photons into my eyes. Then heat arrived illegally fast, raising the tiny hairs on my hands and pressing its hand into my face, even at our distance. Sound came last and hated everything. It wasn't a bang. It was a conversation between gods you're not invited to, and your bones interrupt anyway and are punished for it. The convoy pitched. The driver swore like it would hold the truck to the road. The man opposite me grabbed the ceiling and realized there was no ceiling to grab, only a canvas that flapped as if it could fly us out of the blast out of pity. Somewhere in the row, someone prayed out loud in a language I didn't know, and the words made more sense than any order I'd heard all night. Through the slit at the back of the truck, I watched Rookfield dissolve. The houses went first, not a sequence of failures, but a single yes to a question asked at once. A mushroom rose, stalk, cap, dirty halo, and underneath it the black rolled like oil on fire. The houses went first, not a sequence of failures, but a single yes to a question asked at once. A mushroom rose, stalk, cap, dirty halo, and underneath it the black rolled like oil on fire. The convoy jolted, and every face inside the truck became a mask of white light and open mouths. The sound hit last, a collapsing wave that pressed the breath out of us and rattled bolts loose in the frame. When my vision steadied, Rookfield was gone. The church steeple that once announced every Sunday was ash. The bowling alley, the grocery store, the streets where I learned to ride a bike, all reduced to nothing more than glowing outlines. A memory rubbed out. The monster had been swallowed in the blast, or maybe it had simply changed shape. For a terrible heartbeat, I thought I saw something still moving in the smoke, its limbs sketching new directions before vanishing into the glare. No one spoke. No one could. The only sound was the truck's engine straining against the road as the convoy pushed further into the dark. When we finally slowed, it was at a staging ground that had been invented overnight. Floodlights humming over a field, tables stacked with water, soldiers barking half orders that nobody understood. Someone pressed a blanket over my shoulders, though the night was still hot from fire. Someone else herded us into a line marked decontamination. I tried to call Ryan. Once. Twice. The first attempt rang once, then died. The second didn't connect at all. I typed his name in a message box and stared at it, waiting for a miracle that didn't come. Maybe he made it out. Maybe he didn't. The not knowing was a weight worse than certainty. An officer read names off a clipboard, each syllable sharp as a verdict. When they reached mine, I answered with a voice that didn't sound like mine anymore. They logged me as civilian evacuee, a number, a record to be filed and maybe forgotten. I was alive, but I wasn't sure I had survived. By dawn, the sky remembered how to be blue again. I lifted my head toward it, desperate for the simple comfort of a new day. For a fleeting second, I convinced myself that sunlight meant safety. But then, from a nearby radio, the familiar tone sequence crackled again. A technician cursed, smacked the casing, tried to cut the signal. It didn't matter. The words came anyway, not from the speaker, but from somewhere closer. From inside my head, from the empty air between my teeth. "We are sorry." The same sentence, the same hollow apology. Only now it didn't sound like the government. It sounded like something older, something patient, something that wasn't finished. I left with the others, loaded onto buses bound for towns with names that didn't belong to me. They gave us clean clothes, meals in plastic trays, promises of safety none of us believed. At night, I closed my eyes but never rested. Sleep carried me back to the moment of white light, to Ryan's face disappearing into the smoke, to the shape that moved even as fire tried to erase it. And sometimes, when the room is quiet enough, I hear the low hum return, the same one that rolled across the town before it all began. Sometimes, when I glance at a dark window, my reflection waits half a heartbeat longer than it should before it follows me. At 9:17 p.m., no matter where I am, my phone buzzes once, a phantom vibration that shows nothing on the screen. If your screen ever turns red and those words appear, don't wait for the rest of the message. Don't tell yourself it's just a test. Don't hope it was meant for someone else. Because there isn't a rest of the message. There never was.